Forgiveness is not weakness. It is one of the greatest acts of love and strength in a romantic relationship. We all stumble, we all fall short, but what makes love truly powerful isn't perfection. It's the ability to heal, to grow, and to move forward together. In a world where pride is often mistaken for power, forgiveness is the quiet courage that holds relationships together. Let's explore 4 transformative truths about the power of forgiveness in romantic relationships. Number 1, forgiveness creates emotional freedom. Forgiveness creates emotional freedom in a way that nothing else can. In the context of romantic relationships, it becomes even more profound because of how deeply 2 people can affect one another, both positively and negatively. When love is involved, emotions run deeper, words carry more weight, and wounds cut more sharply. Holding on to those emotional injuries, whether from a harsh word, a broken promise, or a moment of weakness, can imprison the heart. It creates invisible chains that keep us anchored in a cycle of pain, preventing us from experiencing the full richness of love and connection. Forgiveness, then, becomes the key that unlocks that cage, allowing the heart to breathe again. Emotional freedom is not about forgetting the offense or pretending that pain didn't exist. It's about consciously deciding to no longer be held hostage by it. It means making peace with what happened so that it doesn't poison the present or shadow the future. In relationships, when we don't forgive, we tend to replay the hurt like a broken record. We revisit arguments, relive betrayals, and hold onto resentment like armor. It feels like protection at first, but over time, that armor becomes a prison. It keeps love out, it keeps joy out, and worst of all, it keeps healing out. When forgiveness enters, it doesn't always come with a loud declaration. Sometimes it arrives quietly in a whispered thought. I no longer want to carry this pain. That moment is powerful because it marks the shift from being defined by what was done to you to defining yourself by how you choose to respond. And that choice is everything. When we forgive, we reclaim control over our emotional state. We stop allowing someone else's mistake or moment of weakness to dictate how we feel, act, and love. In romantic relationships, the act of forgiving doesn't just release the other person. It releases you. It lightens your spirit. It stops the mental loops of blame and shame that sap your energy and peace. Emotional freedom feels like peace returning to your chest after days, weeks, or even months of inner chaos. It's the absence of that constant tension, that tightness in your throat, the ache behind your eyes. You don't realize how much you've been weighed down until forgiveness allows you to let it all go. Forgiveness also makes room for empathy. When the fog of anger lifts, you begin to see your partner not just as someone who hurt you, but as someone who is also flawed, human, and trying. Emotional freedom means you can look at the person you love and understand that they, too, carry their own wounds, insecurities, and fears. It doesn't excuse the pain they caused, but it makes space for compassion. And where compassion lives, healing begins. Often in relationships, couples think the biggest threat to love is conflict or mistakes. But in truth, it's the unwillingness to release those mistakes that does the most damage. Holding grudges might feel justified. After all, if you've been hurt, it makes sense to protect yourself. But in doing so, you risk keeping both yourself and your partner emotionally exiled. You build walls where bridges could be. And slowly, those walls become barriers not just to your partner, but to your own capacity to give and receive love. When forgiveness is offered, especially after deep hurt, it can feel like a radical act. And it says, I value peace more than pride. I choose love over being right. That shift doesn't just benefit your relationship, it transforms you as a person. You become softer but stronger, more grounded in who you are, and more open to connection. Emotional freedom isn't passive. It's the result of intentional courage. It's choosing to show up without bitterness, to speak without venom, to love without keeping score. One of the most beautiful effects of forgiveness is how it changes the tone of future interactions. Resentment lingers in the background of every conversation until it's released. It colors your tone, affects your body language, and influences your interpretation of even harmless comments. But when forgiveness has cleared the air, there's room for authenticity. You stop reacting based on old wounds and start responding based on the present moment. Trust can begin to rebuild, vulnerability becomes safer, and your connection deepens. It's important to understand that forgiveness is not a one-time event. Sometimes the same hurt resurfaces, especially when something triggers the memory. Emotional freedom comes when you allow yourself to revisit the wound, not to reopen it, but to remind yourself why you chose to heal in the first place. Each time you recommit to that choice, the hurt loses more of its power. You reinforce the new story, one of strength, grace, and growth. Another layer of emotional freedom that comes with forgiveness is the ability to forgive yourself. In romantic relationships, we often carry guilt for the ways we may have contributed to conflict, or for not seeing red flags earlier, or not setting boundaries soon enough. That internal blame can be just as damaging as anger toward the other person. When you extend forgiveness inward, you create wholeness. You stop shaming yourself for being imperfect and instead begin honoring yourself for having the courage to love at all. That self-compassion reflects outward, improving not just your relationship with your partner, but your relationship with yourself. Forgiveness is also a declaration that the past does not have to dictate your future. It gives you and your partner permission to move forward, not in denial, but in strength. It creates emotional space to dream together again, to plan, to hope, and to imagine new memories that are not tainted by old pain. And when both partners are willing to forgive, emotional freedom becomes shared. You co-create an environment where mistakes can be acknowledged without fear, where love isn't withdrawn as punishment, and where trust isn't shattered forever by imperfection. Ultimately, forgiveness is a gift you give to someone you love, and a gift you give to yourself. It unchains the heart from past pain and opens the door to deeper connection, greater intimacy, and a love that is rooted not in fantasy, but in real, raw, enduring truth. Forgiveness won't make everything perfect, but it will make everything possible. And in a world where relationships are often fractured by ego, fear, and emotional baggage, the ability to forgive may be the most powerful expression of love you ever offer. Number 2, forgiveness strengthens trust, even after it's been broken. Trust is the foundation of every meaningful romantic relationship. It's what allows two people to feel safe, seen, and secure with one another. When trust is strong, love feels effortless, communication flows easily, and vulnerability becomes a bridge rather than a risk. But what happens when that trust is broken? When betrayal, dishonesty, or emotional wounds fracture what once felt whole, it can feel like everything is lost. And yet, even in that brokenness, forgiveness holds the potential to rebuild what was damaged, often into something even stronger. Forgiveness strengthens trust not by erasing the past, but by choosing to confront it with honesty, courage, and compassion. Rebuilding trust isn't about pretending the betrayal never happened. It's about showing up after the hurt and saying, "I'm still willing to believe in us." That willingness is powerful because it acknowledges both the pain and the possibility. It doesn't deny the damage, it dares to heal it. When someone has been hurt, the instinct is often to protect the heart. We become guarded, distant, and wary. Every word is questioned, every action analyzed. We may want to trust again, but fear gets in the way. Forgiveness becomes the doorway through which trust can begin to return. It creates space for empathy, understanding, and renewal. It says, even though I have every reason to close myself off, I'm choosing to stay open. I'm choosing to give you another chance, not blindly but consciously. In the early stages after trust has been broken, forgiveness is not a single moment, it's a repeated decision. Every time the memory of the hurt comes back, every time insecurity whispers lies, and every time fear tries to dominate the relationship, forgiveness must be chosen again. It is in those moments that trust begins to rebuild, not as a fragile thread, but as a tested, reinforced bridge between two hearts. Forgiveness strengthens trust by challenging both partners to grow. The person who caused the hurt must face their actions honestly and take full accountability. Real forgiveness cannot exist without responsibility. The wounded partner needs to see effort, consistency, and true remorse, not empty apologies but meaningful change. And as those changes take root over time, forgiveness becomes more than a word. It becomes lived. It becomes real. Trust, then, is not restored by promises, but by actions that align with healing. This process of rebuilding is not easy. It requires patience, communication, and above all, willingness. But it's in the struggle that strength is formed. Forgiveness allows trust to be rebuilt on new ground that is more honest, more mature, and more self-aware. Sometimes, the relationship after forgiveness is even more intimate than before because both partners have been through the fire and chosen to stay. They've seen each other at their worst and still said, "I choose you." Forgiveness also rewires the way we see our partner. When trust is broken, the image we had of them gets shattered. We start to see them through the lens of their failure, but forgiveness gives us a new lens. It reminds us that our partner is not just what they did, they are also who they are becoming. It helps us move from judgment to compassion, and when we can see them trying, hurting, and growing, trust starts to reemerge, not from perfection, but from effort. There's a quiet strength in trusting again after you've been let down. It takes more courage to be vulnerable after betrayal than it does to build a wall. Forgiveness honors that courage. It tells the other person, "I believe in your ability to be better." That belief can be transformative. It gives them a reason to rise, to do better, to earn back what was lost not through pressure, but through purpose. What's even more profound is that forgiveness doesn't just rebuild the trust between two people. It rebuilds the trust we have in ourselves. When you forgive, you send yourself a message that you are strong enough to let go of bitterness, wise enough to learn from the past, and brave enough to trust your heart again. That self-trust is foundational. It means that even if things don't go perfectly, you will be okay. You'll know you gave it your all, and that your choice to forgive wasn't weakness. It was strength rooted in hope. Forgiveness also strengthens communication, which is essential in rebuilding trust. After hurt, assumptions and silence often grow, but forgiveness creates space for honest dialogue. It encourages both partners to express fears, set new boundaries, and talk about what they need moving forward. That kind of emotional transparency builds trust like nothing else. It says we are no longer hiding, we are choosing to be real. And in that realness, love becomes less fragile and more resilient. It's important to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean you ignore red flags or abandon your standards. It means you're willing to see the full picture, the harm that was done, the remorse being shown, and the commitment to change. You hold your partner accountable while also extending grace. It's a delicate balance, but when done with wisdom and sincerity, it's one of the most healing forces in any relationship. Over time, as forgiveness continues to unfold and trust slowly returns, something remarkable happens. You begin to remember the love, not just the pain. You begin to experience moments of joy without the shadow of doubt. You start to laugh again, open up again, and dream again. These are signs that forgiveness is doing its work, that it's not just an idea, but a living, breathing part of your relationship. And yes, there will still be hard days. There will be triggers, moments of doubt, and times when the past threatens to creep back in. But when both partners are committed to the process, those moments don't define the relationship, they refine it. Each time you come back to the table, each time you choose love over fear, trust becomes more solid, more real, more earned. In the end, forgiveness is not about pretending nothing ever happened. It's about choosing to believe in what could still be possible. It's about saying, "This hurt me, but I'm not going to let it steal my ability to love or to trust." That choice, repeated over time, builds something beautiful. It creates a love that isn't naive or idealized, but grounded, tested, and true. Forgiveness strengthens trust not by avoiding pain, but by walking through it with open eyes and open hearts. It's proof that relationships can survive mistakes, that love can be stronger than betrayal, and that two people, willing to do the work, can rebuild not just what they had, but something even better. Number 3, forgiveness allows growth instead of guilt. Forgiveness allows growth instead of guilt by transforming how we relate to both mistakes and the people who make them. In romantic relationships, guilt can be an invisible burden that stifles love, communication, and emotional intimacy. Whether the guilt is carried by the person who made a mistake or imposed by the partner who was hurt, it creates a heaviness that lingers in the background of every interaction. It's the silent wall that stands between two people, even if they're still physically close. What forgiveness does is lift that weight. It clears the emotional space so growth can occur, real, deep, transformative growth that takes the relationship to a higher level of understanding and maturity. Guilt serves a purpose at first. It's a sign of conscience, a signal that something went wrong, and a cue to reflect and reassess. But if it's left unchecked, guilt can morph into shame and self-punishment. It creates fear and avoidance, which leads to silence instead of honesty. The person who feels guilty might begin to shut down emotionally, distance themselves out of fear of further hurting their partner, or fall into a cycle of self-blame that erodes their self-worth. When one partner is stuck in guilt and the other is stuck in resentment, the relationship stops evolving. It becomes a loop of pain where love is no longer growing, it's just surviving. Forgiveness breaks that loop. It steps in and says, we are not defined by the worst version of ourselves. When someone is truly forgiven, they're no longer viewed through the lens of their mistake. They're given the chance to be seen again for who they are becoming, not just who they were in their moment of failure. That is where growth begins. Forgiveness offers the emotional safety needed for reflection, accountability, and change. Instead of living in fear of judgment, the partner who made a mistake can begin to open up, share their remorse, and take meaningful steps to become better. This doesn't mean that forgiveness removes responsibility. On the contrary, it encourages ownership. But the key difference is this: guilt punishes while forgiveness challenges. Guilt says you are bad, but forgiveness says you did something wrong and I believe you can do better. That shift is everything. It creates a space where lessons can be learned and applied, where mistakes become the soil from which personal evolution grows. On the other side, the partner who was hurt also experiences growth through forgiveness. When you choose to forgive, you're choosing to release the role of victim and step into the role of healer, not just for your partner, but for yourself. You're saying, I won't let this wound define how I love. That's an incredibly empowering choice. It requires strength, self-awareness, and the maturity to differentiate between the hurt that was caused and the potential that still exists in your connection. Through forgiveness, the hurt partner often discovers a deeper level of emotional resilience and empathy. You begin to realize that love isn't about perfection. It's about the capacity to evolve through imperfection. Forgiveness also creates a ripple effect. When one partner is forgiven, they're often inspired to grow, not out of obligation or pressure, but out of gratitude. They want to rise to the level of grace they've been given. They want to prove that the forgiveness wasn't in vain. This can lead to increased self-reflection, greater emotional intelligence, and stronger communication. They start listening more, reacting less, and being more intentional with their actions. That's growth in action, and it would never happen if guilt was the dominant emotion. Guilt makes people freeze. Forgiveness helps them move. Moreover, forgiveness opens the door for deeper conversations. Instead of walking on eggshells, both partners can talk openly about what went wrong and what needs to change. These conversations, though uncomfortable, are where some of the most powerful relationship breakthroughs happen. They're the moments when walls come down and understanding builds up. When guilt is replaced with openness, love stops being defensive and starts being curious. It becomes a dialogue, not a monologue of blame. There's also a deeper internal growth that happens with forgiveness. You begin to recognize the patterns that led to the mistake in the first place. whether those patterns came from fear, trauma, insecurity, or unmet needs. You begin to unpack your own triggers, not just to avoid hurting your partner, but to understand yourself better. This kind of introspection is how relationships become more conscious, intentional, and deeply rooted. Forgiveness is the doorway to that awareness. Guilt, on the other hand, often keeps us locked in the surface layer of blame without ever addressing the core issue. One of the most overlooked aspects of forgiveness is how it improves the emotional climate of the relationship. When guilt dominates, there's tension, guardedness, and mistrust. Every mistake feels like it could be the end. Every disagreement carries the weight of the past. But when forgiveness is present, the emotional atmosphere shifts. There's more patience, more compassion, more room for both people to be human. You stop expecting perfection and start appreciating progress. That kind of environment is where love not only survives, it thrives. There's also something to be said about how forgiveness teaches us humility. In choosing to forgive, we acknowledge that we, too, are capable of hurting others. We remember that we're all imperfect, all learning, all trying. That awareness keeps pride in check and allows love to remain grounded. It helps us let go of the unrealistic expectation that our partner will never make a mistake, and instead embrace the idea that growth is a process, and we're in it together. Ultimately, forgiveness allows growth instead of guilt because it restores hope. Guilt looks backward, it anchors you in what went wrong. Forgiveness looks forward, it says, yes, we've been hurt, but we're not done. That hope is what keeps the relationship moving. It keeps both people willing to invest, to try again, to rebuild, and to believe in the love that still exists. With forgiveness, the relationship doesn't just survive the storm, it transforms because of it. The couple becomes stronger, more connected, and more aware of the value of what they almost lost. In every relationship, there will be moments of failure. That's inevitable. But what defines the strength of the bond is not how perfect each partner is, but how willing they are to rise from those failures. Forgiveness is the catalyst that turns pain into purpose, regret into responsibility, and guilt into growth. It is not just a gift to the person who made the mistake, it's a gift to the relationship itself. It says, we are not perfect, but we are still worth fighting for. And in that choice, love grows, not in spite of the struggle, but because of it. Number 4, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. Forgiveness is often seen as something we do for others, a way to offer grace, to repair a relationship, or to give someone a second chance. But the truth is, forgiveness is, at its deepest level, a gift you give yourself. It is an act of emotional liberation that frees you from the heaviness of resentment, bitterness, and pain. Especially in romantic relationships, where emotional wounds cut close to the heart. The power of forgiveness is not only about reconciliation with your partner. It is about reclaiming your inner peace and choosing not to let hurt define your present or future. When someone you love deeply hurts you, it feels personal. The betrayal, the disappointment, the broken expectations. They don't just create pain, they create a narrative. A story you start telling yourself about how unsafe love can be, how trust isn't worth the risk, and how you need to protect yourself at all costs. These thoughts seem like survival, but over time, they become emotional baggage. They harden into walls that not only keep pain out, but also keep love from flowing in. Forgiveness disrupts that story. It says, I choose not to carry this anymore. It's not a denial of what happened. It's not pretending everything is okay. It's a powerful statement that your peace matters more than your pride or your pain. Holding on to hurt often feels like power. Anger gives us a false sense of control. It feels like armor, but underneath that armor is a wounded heart longing to heal. The truth is, holding on to resentment doesn't punish the other person. It punishes you. It steals your joy, clouds your perspective, and keeps you emotionally tied to a painful experience. Every time you replay the argument, reimagine the betrayal, or rehearse what you wish you'd said, you relive the pain. Forgiveness breaks that cycle. It allows you to step out of the past and fully into the present, no longer bound by a moment that already ended. In romantic relationships, this is especially crucial. If you don't forgive, you carry the weight of the offense into every interaction. You begin to see your partner not for who they are today, but through the lens of what they did. This doesn't mean you ignore red flags or dismiss accountability, but it does mean you release the need to keep reliving the pain. You stop assigning them a permanent label based on a temporary action. And by doing that, you also release yourself from being the permanent victim of someone else's mistake. Forgiveness is also an act of self-respect. It says, I deserve to feel whole again. When you forgive, you're not saying the hurt didn't matter. You're saying you matter more than the hurt. You're saying your heart deserves to be light, unburdened, and open. That your future deserves your full presence, not just the parts of you that weren't wounded. It's one of the most courageous things you can do, because it requires you to let go of the false comfort of blame and step into the vulnerability of healing. Another profound aspect of forgiveness as a gift to yourself is the power it gives you over your own story. When someone hurts you, they take something from you. Your trust, your sense of safety, your peace. But when you forgive, you take that power back. You become the author again. You choose the ending. Instead of letting pain become the final word, you rewrite the chapter with grace. That doesn't mean the hurt didn't happen. It means it didn't get the last say. Forgiveness also teaches you something deeply valuable about emotional boundaries. It doesn't mean you have to continue the relationship. It doesn't mean you forget what happened or make excuses. It means you let go of the emotional charge. You no longer allow that person's actions to dictate how you feel about yourself or your life. That's power. That's clarity. It gives you the strength to say, I forgive you, but I still choose what's best for me. Sometimes forgiveness leads to reconciliation. Other times it leads to release. Either way, it sets you free. In relationships that continue, forgiveness becomes a bridge to deeper intimacy. It allows you to let your guard down, to love again without constantly looking over your shoulder. It gives you the ability to receive love without suspicion and give love without hesitation. You stop viewing your partner as a threat and start seeing them as a flawed, evolving human being, just like you. And in that shared humanity, the relationship grows not in perfection, but in resilience. Forgiveness also brings self-awareness. It invites you to reflect on your own role in the relationship dynamic, not in a way that blames you for being hurt, but in a way that empowers you to learn, set boundaries, and grow. You begin to understand your own emotional triggers, your wounds, and your patterns. That kind of clarity is a gift that continues to give. It makes you wiser in love, more compassionate in conflict, and more grounded in your sense of self. One of the most healing realizations you can have is this. Forgiveness is not about letting someone off the hook. It's about letting yourself off the hook. The hook of bitterness, of sleepless nights, of constant overthinking. Forgiveness says, I no longer want to carry the poison of what you did. It's a detox for the soul, and it's a declaration that you will not allow pain to become your identity. Even science backs this up. Studies have shown that people who practice forgiveness experience less anxiety, depression, and stress. Their emotional and physical well-being improves because the body no longer carries the tension of unprocessed anger. Your heart, your mind, your body all benefit when you choose to let go. Forgiveness is not just spiritual, it's physiological. It's healing on every level. Sometimes the person you most need to forgive is yourself. In romantic relationships, we often carry guilt for the ways we acted, the boundaries we didn't set, or the signs we ignored. Self-forgiveness is part of the same healing journey. It's looking at your past choices with compassion instead of condemnation. It's understanding that growth is messy, love is complicated, and perfection is a myth. When you forgive yourself, you stop punishing your current self for the decisions made by a former version of you who didn't yet know better. Ultimately, forgiveness is a gift because it returns you to yourself. It brings you back to your peace, your strength, your clarity. It reminds you that love, true, lasting love, requires grace, not just for your partner, but for your own heart. It allows you to move forward without the chains of the past, to love without the burden of bitterness, and to live without the weight of what could have been. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. In giving forgiveness, you give yourself freedom, you give yourself peace, you give yourself the space to grow, to love again, and to be whole, and that is a gift no one else can give you, but you. In closing, forgiveness is not forgetting. It's not pretending everything is okay. It's making a conscious, empowered choice to release what could destroy your connection in order to protect what matters most, love. So if you're standing at a crossroads in your relationship, wondering if healing is possible, remember this: forgiveness is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a deeper, stronger, more authentic chapter. God bless you.